tayo.
Okay, start again. Shake it off, girl. Shake it off.
Hi, I'm Ging.
I'm Kat.
And I'm Pal.
And you're listening to the 1% Marites here in Sydney. Your number one source of chismis, word spreading.
And kamusta naman ang mga week nyo so far?
Nangangayayat.
Gutom na.
Gutom lang na, Mars. Pero by all fairness, we still have the energy. 100% energy pa rin tayo.
Yes.
Kahit pagod.
Siyempre,
Gutom.
para sa mga viewers and audience natin.
Yes, and we have a very special guest today.
Yes.
We are so excited.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And welcome to today's episode.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Our guest for today is a very truly inspiring person who's achieved a remarkable success even at a young age. Currently working as casual educator. Lots of projects, leads a ton of Filipino Fiestas in Sydney. Yeah, and she is currently studying to become a kindergarten teacher. Yeah, our very own Nicole Bagatsing. Please welcome her. Round of
Thank
applause.
you.
Welcome, welcome. And despite her youth, she's achieved a lot of things na. And nakakatuwa lang.
Another young
gun.
Oo. Kaya tayo nai-inspire eh.
Kaya tayo, napupush na mag-level up kasi ba naman yung mga ini-interview natin, ang dami nang nagawa. And then, sometimes it just reminds you na even the younger people are a strong source of inspiration sila. So sometimes we look at, all kinds of different types of generation. Not just the old ones, not just the young ones. So, happy ako kasi diba, Nicole, when was it that you messaged me and sabi mo you'll be in Sydney?
Just a few days ago. Wala pang 1 week notice. So, salamat din kay Ate Kat sa pagkaka-coordinate niya. Mabilisan lang yung bisita ko dito sa Sydney. Pero sabi ko, mag-guest kaya ako sa 1% Marites. Kasi loyal listener din ako. So, sabi ko, why not? Ako naman.
Oh, yeah.
And look, I think for me, sobrang happy ko because when people reach out to us and they say na, hey, I want to be a part of your podcast, it means that maybe we're doing something right. Kasi hindi naman mag-risk yung tao na yun to volunteer to be a guest
Of
if they don't
course.
see the value of the message and
Of course.
yung value ng episodes natin,
Same.
diba?
I wouldn't reach out to a platform to be on that platform if I didn't agree with the advocacy and the mission of that platform. So, agreed.
Yeah. So, but today is not about us. So, marami tayong pwedeng matutunan and kahit na gutom na kami, I'm sure, after this episode, busog tayong lahat because her stories, her projects, her advocacies, and yung mga pinaglalaban niya, yung mga beliefs niya, I think it will definitely reach a lot of people. And okay, once in a while, may mga mixed perspectives. Pero, sino ba naman sa atin yung walang naririnig na mga comments and opinions from other people, whether it's about your lifestyle, what you eat, where you want to go.
Your career.
Lahat naman
Your
talaga.
marital status.
Exactly. So lahat talaga ng mga choices natin in life, hindi lahat ng tao agree sa'yo. Or hindi lahat ng tao happy sa mga decisions mo. So that's why I invited Nicole because I think that she can really bring something to our conversations. Not the usual na safe or parang we're just kind of talking about mainstream things, but I want this to have a little bit of tension because, di ba?
Kaya nga eh.
Masaya rin pag may tension minsan.
Kaya nga kinakabahan na rin ako eh.
Pero guys, kaya join us as we explore Nicole's journey, insights, and valuable lessons she learned along the way.
Yes. So, let's start with this. When I asked Nicole, what is it? What are the 2 things or 3 things that you're passionate about? And then she told me it's about branding or what I would say identity and education. So, tell us very briefly, how did you end up in this path? Now, you're very passionate about what you do, not just in your career. Kasi educator ka din, di ba? That's why you picked education. And at the same time, how did you end up in this path of being very involved sa mga community projects?
Of course. I'll definitely share. So I'm an educator and an organizer. And so for our listeners, just to explain, educator can mean you work in childcare, early childhood, kindergarten. I'm currently an assistant working towards my teaching license. But I've been in the early childhood workforce since I was about 19. And then as an organizer, I've organized youth programs, workshops for young people, both Filipino and non-Filipino. And I've also organized a yearly Filipino Fiesta. So it's actually based down at the western suburbs of Melbourne. And yeah, I guess there wasn't really a clear moment when I was 16 and I first moved, going on 11 years now, my Aussieversary. Hindi ko inisipin nung 16 ako at lumipat ako na, sige, magiging community organizer ako. Sige, magiging teacher ako. Hindi ko yun inakala. Parang nangyari na lang. But at the same time, hindi rin siya biglaan nangyari. Hindi rin siya overnight. I knew I was always going to work with kids. I knew I was always going to have some type of front-facing role. I knew I was always going to talk to people, engage with people. Not saying that that role doesn't come with its own cons and its own difficulties, but I just knew I was going to be in that field because I wanted to work towards my strengths. And then as a community organizer, it started off with volunteering. And then as I picked up more experience, I started to see that I had certain skill sets that could benefit the community with healthy boundaries first. And by benefit the community, I mean I could serve Filipino youth in Melbourne, the Filipino diaspora, with my skills. So certain things like, lumaki ako sa Pilipinas, 16 years, pero magaling ako mag-English at magaling ako mag-Tagalog. Hindi lahat ng Pilipino na lumilipat sa Melbourne or sa Victoria, tinatago nila yung Tagalog kasi karanasan gusto ng mga pamilya nila English lang. Tuwing nangyayari yun, nagkakaroon ng disconnect kasi pag mag-organize ka ng fiesta or mag-organize ka ng youth program or event, yung mga tito, tita, lolo, lola, yung mga organizer, Tagalog pa rin.
Of course.
Hindi ko sinasabing masama na pinipili nila mag-Tagalog versus English. I think there's a time and place for both languages, and the reality of it is we live in Australia, so we need to learn English. And I'm not trying to shame them either for pushing for their children to learn English because it's a life skill. If you're going to thrive in Australia, it's the language that we use for work, for school. So naiintindihan ko yun. But because of that and Filipinos' views on you can only learn one language, and I'm not speaking on all Filipinos, I'm just speaking on behalf of my individual experience, I noticed that I was able to tap into that there was a need for someone who, I wouldn't say bridge because I don't think I bridge both generations perfectly, but I'm able to code switch within both worlds. So kaya kong makipagkaibigan sa born and raised dito sa Australia kasi magaling naman ako mag-English at lumaki din naman ako dito. Dito ako nag-high school, dito ako nagtapos, dito ako nag-graduate. Pero kaya ko rin makisama sa mga lumaki sa Pilipinas. Kasi doon din ako lumaki for 16 years and hindi ako yung klaseng Pilipino na pinapagmalaki na nakalimutan ko mag-Tagalog. No. Why will I forget how to speak Tagalog or articulate myself in a language that I was born and raised with for 16 years. So yeah, I guess it started with that context, community involvement, volunteering. And then when I was 23, I had the opportunity to organize my first Filipino Fiesta with a not-for-profit out in the West, a community space called the Point Cook Pop-Up Park. And it started off from there. And then 2022, I started volunteering with a local Filipino newspaper, the Philippine Times. I write articles for them on and off when there are events or there are projects that I'm invited to. And I guess it's been on an upward slope, and I've been trying to keep up. It is quite busy. I definitely try to exercise work-life balance. And now with the education space, I'm trying to figure out my niche in the early childhood space.
Hindi pa niya pinlano yung career niya, ha? Kasi, ha? Wala, girl.
Plinano ko certain aspects, pero hindi lahat. Plinano ko na, alam ko nung bata ko na yung trabaho ko somehow will involve little kids because I loved working with children even when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted something where I get to talk in different languages, bring people together, travel. Well, this so far, locally, I travel. And I travel all around Victoria for different events. So aspects of those I'm able to pull into. Pero hindi ko plinano yung mga bagay na tipong magiging organizer ako ng fiesta. Parang kung sasabihin mo yun sa akin 10 years ago, parang iisipin ko, kaya ko ba yun? Magiging organizer ba talaga ako? Parang hindi ko naiisip na magiging organizer ako.
But with that kind of mindset, parang naa-attract mo na lahat eh. Diba? So, it just naturally comes to you.
Naturally, yes, it does come. But also with that, I have to filter and be quite purposeful with the opportunities that come my way. There are elders in the community who tap me to run things or lead things, and I still try to practice work-life balance Because the reality of it is a lot of community projects and organizing is unpaid. So I still pick and choose. So yes, I do attract opportunities, but I have to pick and choose.
Sobrang daming ang opportunities eh. Iba yung iba.
Minsan kasi hindi na bagay yung mga sinasuggest sa akin.
So, okay, still practicing work-life balance. So, nag-ano na tayo dito sa topic na to before we draw na, di ba? So, ikaw, so siya, kasi sinabi niya kung how she practice work-life balance. Ikaw, kaya mo bang share sa amin na,
Sige,
alam mo yun?
definitely.
Sige, share ka a little bit. Na,
Sige.
Baka may mali kaming ginagawa.
baka, alam mo yung natutunan namin from Rona, maybe,
Baka may further
Iba.
idea. Sige.
yeah.
So,
Let's unpack
education and community organizing space. Okay. Sa akin lang to. And again, disclaimer, only speaking on behalf of my life experiences, not telling any of our listeners that you need to live it up every single decision of your life on how I did it. No. Definitely figure out what works for you. So in the education space, just individually, I prefer to have separate contacts and compartmentalize. So people that I network with in the teaching space, I won't invite them to non-teaching events or, non-teaching related gatherings. Just because I feel like I only know them in the teaching space, so it makes sense to keep them there. But of course, there is some overlap, and that's fine. But you just pick and choose. And I also accept that within any job din naman, kahit hindi ako naging educator, kahit hindi ko trabaho sa education space, sometimes it's just better to be co-workers with someone, not become their best friend. I can see you at work in the education space, you're my co-educator, but I don't need to get to know you personally. Not a bad thing if you get to know your co-workers personally. I just prefer not to. I just prefer to go to work, clock out. If I made friends at a workplace, great. But it's not my main goal. I don't go into every single workplace or go into every single school, childcare, or kinder that I've worked at thinking na, ay, mahahanap ko yung barkada ko dito. Mahahanap ko yung best friend ko dito. Hindi ako naghahanap ng companionship at camaraderie sa trabaho. Para sa akin, trabaho. It's not bad to be friendly. I'm not saying it's bad to be cordial. I'm just saying just pick and choose what you share. I don't think every single person at my workplaces need to know every single one of my choices, every single one of my personal life experiences. I pick and choose. Organizing space, work-life balance. It's tough. And natutuwa ako na tinanong mo to kasi alam kong maraming youth leader or community organizer na nakakaranas ng burnout. And burnout is real. Because we do this not because we're paid well. Because in the community organizing space, umaasa tayo sa volunteerism, donations, umaasa tayo sa goodwill. And the reality of it is, it costs money to live. We need money to pay for rent. We need money for, groceries. And so where do you pivot, of course, of you love this, but how can you do it so it financially doesn't deplete you? So my one learning advice would be really try and measure up if this opportunity is worth your mental health. Really try and assess, and don't be afraid to say no. Alam ko kasi sa kultura ng Pilipino, lalo na sa akin coming from a youth leader, to be honest, I'm aging out of the youth leader scene kasi I'm turning 27 in June. Pero
soon.
dati, ayoko mag-no sa mga tito at tita na, nagpapa-invite sa akin na mag-volunteer or mag-lead ng program or workshop. Bakit ayoko mag-no? Kasi unang-una, alam ko na walang ibang gagawa ng workshop na yon or walang ibang magte-take over ng opportunity na yon. And naiintindihan ko for other uni students or other young people at that time, bakit sila mag-no? Kasi may trabaho sila, may uni sila, nag-aaral sila, hindi to bayad. So what's in it for them? So you really have to weigh in if it's worth it. Second thing is, okay, sabihin mo ngang hindi ka bayad para sa opportunity. Pero still advocate for yourself. Can they reimburse your travel going there? Can they feed you lunch? Can they feature one of your projects? If there are businesses involved, can you partner locally with those businesses? Can you add them to their network? So think of it just from a logistics perspective. You might not be gaining money from it per hour, but are you gaining other things? Yun yung ina-assess ko. And then just to tie back sa not being afraid to say no, always explaining to titas or lolos and lolas because they also lead a lot of community organization work sa Pilipinas, leading it all the way to here in New South Wales and Victoria. Sometimes it's not personal. I just don't have time. Estudyante ako, nagtatrabaho ako, hindi to personalan. Just because I'm saying no to this event, I'm not closing doors. I just don't have time and capacity, and that's okay. And also just filtering, minsan nagsasuggest sila ng mga events or mga opportunities that it's really just not my forte and I'm not interested in getting in those fields. I'll give some examples. I've had some titas reach out to me and ask me, why don't I get involved in their local pageants? And it's not a personal attack on anyone who's found a personal sense of joy in pageants, but they cost an arm and a leg. On top of that, you need to go to all of these rehearsals, pay for all of this hair, makeup, photography, and I just can't afford it. So I'm going to say no. I don't have a car in Melbourne. I commute everywhere. And so hassle din to go from point A to point B for an opportunity that I don't really want. So for me, that's not worth it. I also had another tito who kept pushing to me, oh, Nikki, bakit hindi ka mag-artista? May itsura ka naman. Oh, kaya mo bang kumanta? Oh, ganito, ganyan. And again, I loved musical theater as a kid. I loved performing arts. But the reality of it is, I'm an educator and I'm an organizer. This is where I'm at. I didn't pursue being an artista. And so other people might have an idea of what you should have done with your time, particularly the older generation. But you still know yourself the best. Huwag kang masyadong magpadala sa unsolicited advice ng ibang tao. And kung paninindigan mo yung advice ng elder na yon, tito, tita, pinsan, ate, kuya, tingnan mo muna yung pagkakakilala nila sa'yo. Yun ba yung buhay na gusto mo para sa sarili mo? Or sabi-sabi lang yan kasi napipilitan ka? Or napipilitan silang sabihan ka ng ganito, ganyan?
Wow.
Grabe. I'm speechless.
Have that discernment.
Kayo.
Oo, girl.
Grabe.
Tamang-tama sa lahat ng points niya. Tamang-tama talaga. Pero being a Filipino, no, ang daming unsolicited advice.
Yes.
Hindi lang within the family kahit sa iba
It's
eh.
never turned off. I mean, people that I don't know will come up and let me know their 2 cents. Hindi ko hinihingi, pero okay, sige. Pinaliwanag mo na yung buong buhay mo sa akin, okay? Lahat ng opinion mo. Parang minsan natatawa na lang ako kasi masarap sumagot pero hindi na lang ako sumasagot.
So what do you mean? And sorry para lang sa mga nakikinig na maybe they don't often hear this term unsolicited advice.
Oo.
Can you just describe that
Of course,
in
be
the
happy
most
to.
simplest terms so that we recognize
Okay.
kung unsolicited advice ba yun or talagang
Genuine care.
genuine care siya? Exactly.
I would say it's unsolicited if you're not asking for their opinion or you don't know them very well or you don't actually value their opinion, but they see the need to give you all of this criticism that isn't constructive, isn't helpful, essentially puts you down. Or sometimes it might not necessarily have to cause trauma for it to be unsolicited. It might just be inconvenient. So, I mean, I can give some examples. I cop a lot of unsolicited advice from titos and titas on the fact that, I'm not yet married. I don't have kids. I don't plan to have kids. And galit na galit sila lahat na ayoko magkaroon ng anak. Parang gumuguho yung buhay nila. But
This is a good one. Okay, unpack natin yan mamaya.
But the reality of it is, these people don't know me well. Okay, sana kung hiningi ko yung opinion mo, oy, ate, do you think I should have kids? Ate, do you think I should get married? Give me your feedback. That's not unsolicited. Kasi hiningi ko. I valued your opinion. I went out of my way to talk to you. But when you barely know someone, when they're not asking, when it's not the time and place. So I guess just have a feel for yourself, though. Obviously, it can come across as genuine care if you've known this person for a very long time. If you really, wanted their empathy and wanted their opinion, it might be something like, okay, Ate Kat, I value your opinion in the leadership space or in the podcast space because you have experience and I want to know your take. So just have that into consideration if you're asking for it and if that person's input is kind of relevant to what they're letting you know.
But do you know why people love giving
Sa mga
unsolicited
Pilipino?
advice? Well, could be Filipinos, but unsolicited advice is actually kahit ano namang klaseng
Nangyayari din naman sa
background, race, age.
hindi mga Pilipino.
I mean, come on, let's admit.
Sa akin lang yung trauma ko is majority Filipino-based.
Pero lahat tayo, nakapagbigay
oo.
tayo, lalo na kapag sobrang passionate ka, like kami, nag-health and fitness kami. Minsan, may kausap ka, hindi naman sila nanghihingi ng advice, pero because you're so passionate,
Binigyan mo ng
About
advice,
what you
binigyan mo
do.
ng tip.
kahit anong sabihin nila, you always have a way of bringing it back to don't do this, don't eat that. Dapat ito yung calorie mo, dapat ito yung sinusunod mo na protein. Kasi you can't help it. It's just who you are. And minsan, when you don't watch yourself and you're not being mindful kung sino yung mga kausap mo, it slips. The unsolicited advice without you being aware, talagang nangyayari siya. Pero why do you think people do this?
It's a mix of reasons. I'm only going to specifically share my experiences with Filipinos just because that's where I've copped the most unsolicited advice from. My one is, I think, because of the generational gap. Me being 26, turning 27, and these titos, titas, lolos, lolas, feeling like they've been in Australia longer. So they have the capacity or the license to tell me this kasi sila yung mas may alam or sila yung mas marunong. But then the reality of it is, hindi nila alam lahat ng pinagdadaanan ko. Hindi rin sila marunong sa mga industriya at mga trabaho na pinapasukan ko. So if I needed their advice, I can go to them. I'm not saying they're awful people because they let me know one comment that I didn't agree with. But I also think it might be from the culture of Filipinos where, not saying every single Filipino, but we tend to be very co-involved in other Filipinos' lives. Mahilig tayong makichismis sa buhay ng ibang tao, mahilig tayong magtanong, mahilig tayong, paano ba? Parang mahilig tayong makisawsaw. Minsan, kahit hindi natin pinagdadaanan, gusto nating pagdaanan kasi gusto nating i-insert yung sarili natin. Ganun yung mga Pilipino eh.
Oh my God, totoo yan.
Naghahanap ng drama. No? Hindi pwedeng ang buhay walang drama. Hindi makulay.
Or maybe actually, kasi sa sobrang drama ng buhay nila, gusto nilang umalis doon. So, gusto nila yung iba.
Gusto nila lang sumiksik sa buhay ng ibang tao.
Parang soap opera, hindi ba't kang channel?
Ayoko ng drama ng buhay ko. Hindi siya challenging masyado or
Hindi mo pa nga naayos yung life mo, no?
Para sa wait lang, masyado magulo dito. Manggulo tayo ng iba. Guluhin natin.
Tita naman eh.
Oo, ganun. Oo. I guess that would also be a very good tie for crab mentality. Kasi, magulo buhay ko, hindi magulo buhay niya.
Guluhin natin.
Guluhin natin buhay niya kasi kung siya umaasenso, hindi pwede.
Grabe.
Toxic Filipinos, one-on-one.
Actually, na-topic na rin namin yung crab mentality. And it's crazy that we're still talking about it today. Kasi parang,
It's cross-transferable kasi to iba't ibang experiences. Like after this question, when we touch on education, it will be cross-transferable again.
yeah, kaya nga hindi rin talaga madali i-break yung cycle. Kasi if you've seen this way of thinking, itong ganitong mindset and toxic Filipino culture, why hasn't it ended? Like, why can someone just freaking raise the flag?
Red flag.
Diba?
Tigilan natin to mga Pilipino.
We're starting it now.
Enough na. Let's just stop it. Let's just stop it, right? Why do you think this cycle hasn't really reached the end point? Why are we still talking about it today?
That's a very
Kasi
good question.
nakakapagod, diba? How many times and how many freaking generations na dapat paulit-ulit yung pinag-uusapan yung crab mentality. But the fact that we're talking about it means it still exists.
It's still
around. We
alive.
experience it. It's alive. The crab is alive. Hashtag
Hindi nauubos ang
crabbies.
Hindi nauubos ang crabs.
And it's not only with Filipinos, ha? Ang daming
Australians
crabbies.
have tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
So why do you think hindi pa rin natatapos tong crab mentality na to?
Sa akin, yung take ko, and baka mali ako, depende rin talaga sa sitwasyon, depende rin talaga sa tao. May mga ibang Pilipino na sa tingin nila, pag nandito na tayo sa Australia, kailangan pa rin nilang mag-away para sa mga opportunity katulad ng pag-aaway sa Pilipinas. Kasi hindi pa sila sanay sa sistema dito sa Australia. Or they have this mindset that there's not actually enough opportunities for Filipino immigrants to succeed here. There's only enough opportunities for a few to succeed. But I would have to disagree with that. Australia, we're such a lucky country. Mahirap maging mahirap, lalo na sa Pilipinas. I would not wish Filipino poverty upon not even my worst enemy because of how hard it is to be poor back home. But when they come with that mindset here that, back home, I had to compete. I had to fight for opportunity. I couldn't let other people get ahead of me or else walang matitira para sa akin. Dinala nila yung scarcity mindset na yun hanggang dito. Baka hindi sila masamang tao because a lot of times they had to do that to survive. Mahirap yung mga pinagdaanan nila and that's their coping mechanism. But it's very hard to unlearn when you're already here in a different country, different pathway, different background, and abundance of opportunity. It's very hard to unlearn that cycle.
Exactly. And sobrang nakaka-relate ako dyan because as you know, one of the projects that we started and si Ging and Pau, they're also very involved in this, is Rice PH. So with Rice PH, kaya namin siya kinreate because it's actually the opposite of crab mentality. Kasi dun sa Rise PH, nag-create kami ng resource hub as well as a platform for people to share job opportunities. Imagine mo, may mga nagpo-post doon na, guys, may nakita akong jobs dito, baka gusto nyo mag-apply. Or naglalakad lang sila, may naka-post wanted. Kitchen chef or cook. Pipicturan, isasend dun sa group chat or dun sa page. Parang, asan yung lack of opportunities?
Oo.
Ang daming free workshops, free seminars.
Yes. Whether it's Filipino-hosted or non-Filipino-hosted, dito kung high school student ka, uni student ka, pumunta ka sa mga socials, pumunta ka sa mga workshop, pumunta ka sa youth council, pumunta ka dun sa high school mo. Maraming programa dito. So, tama ka. Walang shortage. Kailangan mo lang maghanap.
Kailangan mo umaksyon kasi yung iba, and this is also a very, Pinoy mindset, and I think it's a strategy that worked for us when we were back in the Philippines. Masyado tayong nag-over-rely sa connections. And nag-over-index tayo sa, sino ba yung kakilala mo na pwede magpasok sa akin sa trabaho? May kakilala ka ba? May kakilala ka ba? And nagkakaroon na yung over-dependence sa ibang tao. And if they're not helping you, you don't want to help yourself. And you will blame the system. You will blame everything outside of you. But you never actually take a look at, well,
yourself.
Hang on a minute. Am I actually being responsible for
Lahat
the
ng
opportunities?
ibang tao sinita mo pero sarili mo hindi mo pinanindigan.
Yeah. Have you seen that happen? Whether sa'yo personally, have you experienced that? Yung bago ka pa dito?
Indirectly, I would say, and this is a very good segue back into education, there were a handful of girls, and I really truly wished them well, that they befriended me at first when I first moved 16 to 19. And they befriended me on the premise, initially, I thought na, oh wow, another Filipino girl wants to befriend me. And I thought they were trying to be my friend. But then later on, when I got older, I realized, oh shucks, humihingi lang yun ng pabor. So they would reveal to me later on like, oh, can, my parents get your dad's phone number? We want to ask about this. We want to ask about visa pathways. We want to figure out, how you became a permanent resident. Or I heard you're working. Pwede mo ba akong ipasok sa... At that time, my jobs were very basic. It's very normal here in Australia to get a part-time job when you're in high school. Retail, hospitality, work at your local cafe. Then they would ask me to bring them into my workplace. And not really anything too bad or traumatic, but at that time, hindi ko sila mapasok sa trabaho ko because the reality of it is my high school jobs weren't hiring. Also, even when I was in high school, this is a general job thing, like even into adulthood, I would bring this. Kung hindi mo kilala yung work ethic ng tao, delikado na ipasok mo sila sa workplace mo.
Tama yan.
'Di ba? Kasi pag hindi magaling yung work ethic ng tao, baka ma-drag down yung work team, baka ma-inconvenience yung boss mo, baka ikaw pa yung maipit.
Ikaw pa, oo.
At kahit kaibigan ko yung isang tao, light-hearted friend, hindi ko makikita yung work ethic nila kasi iba pa rin yung magkaibigan lang tayo versus nasa work na tayo. Iba na yung responsibilidad, iba na yung gawain natin. So, at that time, hindi ko na-realize that people had the tendency to view me as a commodity. Not so much that they were traumatizing me or holding me against my will, more so that they saw or they had this false impression that if they befriended me, I could get them a leg up to, how to become a permanent resident.
Parang you can pull strings or you can give them like the magic formula.
Or I can get them into my workplace and then I'd have to let these people know, I can't help you. My dad isn't going to be able to help you either. Even if you did talk to my dad, I get people asking me into adulthood 10 years later, can you help me with this? Because you moved here when you were 16. Visa pathway migrations change. I'm not a visa migration agent. Work pathways, I'm not a pro at every single career industry. So I won't be able to help every single Filipino immigrant. That's just the reality of it. And then later on, what irritates me or what irks me is they have the audacity to argue back with me na, hindi mo ako matutulungan. Bakit? Bakit hindi mo ako gustong tulungan? Akala ko kasi matutulungan mo ako kasi ang tagal-tagal mo na dito sa Australia. Nung 16 ka, nandito ka. Sabi ng mama ko, may kaya yung pamilya mo. Sabi ng mama ko, Bagatsing ka. Akala ko kasi matutulungan mo ko kasi Bagatsing ka. I heard you're a Yaneza and you'd be able to help me out. And then that's when it clicked to me, you viewed me as a commodity from the get-go. You never befriended me to be my friend. Because as soon as I couldn't help you pull those strings, whether it was for work or your visa, you realized, okay, I'm not going to interact with her anymore. So that's a sad reality.
That hurts.
Totoo.
That hurts.
Masakit.
Is it one of the
Na-feel ko
reasons
yun.
kung bakit pag work lang talaga, you don't really befriend people kasi it will hurt you eh.
Yes, partially that has contributed. That is also another good segue to why I don't have a Filipino barkada. I don't really mingle well with groups. I just prefer individuals. Not saying I don't have Filipino friends, but just I've chosen just for my own peace and my own mental health to spend my free time with non-Filipinos.
Kasi very cliquey yung mga Pinoys eh. Diba? Tapos, nangyayari yan
Transactional.
Ha?
Transactional ba?
Opportunista.
Man, I think, sadly, and karamihan talaga, na-fall sila sa ganong mindset or way of thinking kasi nga, nasa survival mode tayo. Because, for me, looking back, I had to ask other people for opportunities. I'm not gonna lie.
Of course.
One of my very first jobs, I got it because yung friend ko, daddy niya yung may-ari nung pizza shop. Okay. The other job I got, where I used to, promote, nakuha ko yun because my friend is cousins with the owner of the agency. Diba? Hindi masamang humingi ng tulong or gamitin yung connection mo. But it gets to a point and you can really be very hardcore in being so transactional na pag hindi ka nila natutulungan at wala silang silbi sa'yo, you're just gonna cut them off. Or sisiraan mo pa sila sa ibang tao.
Oo, totoo
Which is yun yung ayaw natin mangyari. Kasi, hang on a minute, wala naman tayong kontrata. Wala tong bayad. It's a kaya nga favor, diba?
Yeah.
Pero pag ako'y nag-favor, you know it's not a favor. It's a demand. Minsan lang ako makingi ng favor, pero pag sinabi kong favor, hindi talaga favor yun.
May gusto akong idagdag doon, Ate Kat. Kasi interesting yun, di ba? Sinabi mo that, inadmit mo that has happened for you in the past.
Of course.
And I also want to give perspective that because I had those experiences, I'm not saying I'm completely against healthy networking, but you have to pick the time and the place. You also have to pick, is it the right person to ask? And how you react when the person says no. That's what shows to me whether it was transactional in a negative way, in a user-friendly, opportunista way, or was this person just genuinely networking like, hey, I think you would be great for this opportunity. Hey, do you know anyone who's hiring? If they asked me for help and it didn't personally inconvenience me, my network, wala namang maiipit sa akin, like, I'm okay. But when they start asking for things that I actually can't help with, but they insist that I should, doon na nakakapirwisyo and hindi yun namamalayan ng mga ibang Pilipino.
And ang masama pa doon, rather than the two of us having a conversation about what no meant for me and how it made me feel, hindi ko sasabihin sa'yo.
Oo, sisiraan mo lang ako.
Sasabihin ko sa kanila. Mas masaya yun eh. Hindi ko
Sasabihin mo sa talikod ko.
Ay, naku yan si Nicole. Grabe, kala ko talaga ganito siya.
Hindi niya ako tinulungan. Nagmamaka-youth leader.
Yes,
Nandito
so-
siya ever since 16. Tapos wala naman siyang mabigay sa akin na trabaho.
Yeah, she's all this, she's all that. Tapos,
Grabe.
this is
Jesus.
we need to really look at ourselves when we do this because I know we do. Hindi tayo nagmamalinis dito.
Oo,
Pero
totoo.
you are poisoning the well because hindi nga nila kilala si Nikki, pero because of what you're saying, kung nag-meet up sila sa community event sa Melbourne, hindi pa nga nila nakakausap. May perception na kagad sila because you poisoned the well and you never gave them the opportunity to introduce themselves and show them who they really are. Kasi binase mo lang yung pagkakakilala mo doon sa tao, sa identity nila, and that will be coming shortly. Binase mo lang kung ano yung narinig mo. Diba? Sakit natin yung mga Pilipino. Si ganito, ganyan. Naku, ganito yun eh. Narinig ko,
Asumero,
ganito.
asumera.
Oo, asumero. Parang ako, okay, edi, every time ba, so defensive mode ka. And it's not nice to be defensive kasi parang ang nasa fight or flight yung para bang feeling mo, hinuhusgahan ka. Wala ka bang sinasabi, ginajudge ka na.
Totoo yan. Parang,
It's a bad vibe. It's not a nice
masamang pakiramdam kasi yung tipong minsan papasok ako sa isang sitwasyon, feeling ko na wala pa akong ginagawa, ako na yung kontrabida. Ako na yung masama. Hindi pa kita kilala pero galit na kayo sa akin.
Na-judge ka na agad.
Pero sa akin, just to add to that, I've just learned how to have thick skin because of that, because of the Filipino community. Not to romanticize the resilience that has had to come with the toxicity of our own minority group, but it's taught me not to take things too personally. So it does happen. Everything you said about, things will happen behind my back and it'll just catch up to me later on. And I'll find out from reliable sources that, hey, this person has said this and this about you. And then I can choose to react in two ways. First, I could choose to be affected and take it personally and go on a downward spiral. Or I can just choose to be like, oh my God, that person spends that much of their free time thinking about me. That's actually kind of funny. Because, I don't know, I find it so amusing that these people genuinely think that it's going to impact me when the reality of it is I just go on with my day. I just let it go. Like, it's not worth stooping down low to that level. Like, masa-stress lang ako, magkaka-wrinkles lang ako na maaga, masasayang lang yung brain cells ko. May iba akong ginagawa sa buhay ko, may schedule ako. So, pinipili ko na lang wag magpa-affect. Pero of course, with that said, it is hard. It is hard. There are days and times when it's easier said than done.
Oo naman.
Wow. Ako din naka-resonate ako dun sa, yun nga, yung pagiging user. Pero ako,
Ikaw yung user o ikaw yung ginagamit?
ginamit ko din yung source.
Gamitan silang dalawa,
But
Mars.
I made it empowering one. Na
Okay,
parang,
collaborative.
oo, parang,
okay.
alam mo yun, na parang, I made sure na magagamit ko talaga to and hindi siya manghihinayang na pinasok niya ako sa ganun. Sa work. Alam mo yun, minsan kasi nga, di ba, ginamit mo lang pero wala ka mang ginagawa, tamad ka naman pala. You just want, yung pera lang yung goal mo eh. Gusto mo lang kumita, for yourself. So sa akin, syempre, nakapasok ka na sa company and syempre, you wanna, show off, di ba? Na ikaw, ako parang, for example, ginawa ko siyang empowering one kasi talagang ako sa work, nagpasikat ako,
Dapat
alam mo
lang.
yun?
Oo.
And then, ngayon, parang, di ba, they giving you more opportunities,
Syempre.
scholarship, or di ba? So, minsan may ganon. So, ang mga tao dapat, when you use a person, use them
well.
It's intentionally, but at the same time, you feel dapat,
Fill their
nag-grow
cup.
ka,
Fill their
nag-grow
cup.
ka, oo. And then, that person who you use, parang, di ba, nakikita niya na you're growing,
So worth it pala na pinasok ko siya sa
Exactly.
opportunity na to, sa company na to, because she proved why we hired her versus another John Smith.
Because that person who helped you, makikita nila na unang-una, thank you, hindi mo ako pinahiya. Kasi nag-trust ako sa'yo, kaya nga kita ni-refer, pinasok dito, blah, blah, blah. Second of all, give them a chance to see na deserve mo. Kasi when someone trusts you at first, they actually don't know, deserve ba nitong taon to? O ginagawa ko lang to out of goodwill, kind heart. And then, the third thing is, huwag mo rin kalimutan na pagpasalamatan yung taong tumulong sa'yo. Whether you get the opportunity or not, ha? Diba? Whether, kaya rin, na-invite ka na sa interview, hindi ka pumasa.
Mag-thank you ka pa rin. Oo.
Diba?
Just for camaraderie and goodwill and the peace of that person knowing that even if you didn't get the role, you got one step closer to it.
Kasi hindi mo alam, baliktad ang mundo. One day, iba naman.
Ikaw naman, di ba?
Ikaw naman. Yung mga
Ikaw
tao
naman.
Iikot rin yung mundo. That's a good segue for our next topic on education.
Yeah, kasi actually, it involves din the education. Kasi ako, ginamit ko yung, yung source na yun. Kasi, like, nag-start ako sa Australia, wala akong education eh. Like, paano ako mag-a-apply ng job? Di ba? Paano ako para wala akong resume, alam mo yun? Anong lalagay ko sa resume? Back in Philippines, pero hindi pa rin siya valid, di ba? Pag nag-apply ka ng job. So, it's more on talagang connection dito sa Australia. First, sa akin, yun yung pagkakaano.
Yun yung individual experience mo.
Oo. So, sa akin, yun nga, I need connection to get the job. Alam mo yun? So, ang funny lang kasi parang yun nga, I use it talaga na to empower me nung nakarating na ako dun sa position na yun. So, yun, education is, yun nga, sinasabi ko na I'm not educated dito. Nag-start pa lang ako sa Australia, starting point. And until now, since dumating ako sa Australia, it's the same job. But you're excelling. So, yun lang na, naisip ko lang na, alam mo yun.
Well, we all have to start somewhere.
Yes.
And I think sobrang swerte din ng mga Filipinos dito na meron silang fellow Filipino na nami-meet na genuinely, wala kang interest other than tulungan sila. Yung iba kasi, yung first sweldo mo, akin yung 10% dyan, ha?
Pinagkakitaan siya pa.
Parang agent.
Or dahil tinulungan kita sa trabaho niya, tulungan mo naman ako dito, tulungan mo naman ako dyan, i-intro mo naman ako dun.
Kailangan
parang
lagi may
nag-take-
kapalit.
So may ano na kayo, may listahan na kayo. Paramihan na kayo ng mga favors sa isa't
Utangan.
isa.
Utang na loob. Doon papasok yun.
Utang na loob.
Ayan. So, ayun, thank you Ging for sharing. And sabi ko nga sa inyo, may konting tension. Nafe-feel nyo ba yung tension?
Actually, hindi ko pa nga na-share
you
yung,
feel it?
yun nga
Warm
yung
up pa lang.
education.
I have a question for the hosts. Tell me about your experience with education here and early workforce. I'm just curious because I want to know everyone's work backgrounds, education backgrounds. Did you move here to study here? Did you do uni here or high school here? Yeah.
Ako, very traditional path pa din. Kasi when I moved to Australia, I already know na mag-aaral ako. So, parang naka-prep na kasi yung life ko for me eh. You know how adults are. Nag-create na sila ng blueprint for success and you just, have to say yes. Kasi hindi ko pa naman alam at the time kung ano yung gusto ko. So, lumipat ako dito. Nag-enroll ako ng year 11. Yan, year 11, 12, tas nag-university, and then after that, straight into the workforce. Wala talagang pahinga. Tuloy-tuloy yun. Sabi ko pa nga, mag-gap year ako. Syempre, alam mo na, ang sasabihin ng mga adults. There's no such thing. That's a very Australian or westernized concept.
To do a gap year.
Yeah, so nagtuloy-tuloy lang ako. And then, thanks to God, after university, I landed a role at Woolworths. So, doon ako nag-start ng graduate program.
Amazing.
Which is rare. Kasi sabi ko talaga, parang, bakit ako yung pipiliin amongst thousands of applicants? Kasi Woolworths has one of the best graduate programs and it's a 90-year-old company. So, very stable. Yun. And then, nagtuloy-tuloy na doon. And then, after that, nag-work na ako sa Canva after 7 years almost of working for Woolworths. I moved from retail to technology. And lumipat ako pandemic. So, it was a really huge risk. Because most people, they don't wanna move. Kasi
Particularly during pandemic,
During
mahirap
the
na nga yung mga sitwasyon ng mga tao.
Oo, pero there was like a rebellion happening inside of me na parang sabi ko, if I don't do this now, it will never happen. Kasi mga opportunities, ganun lang siya eh. Dumadaan lang yan. And kailangan talaga grab mo lang kahit walang guarantee, walang certainty. Pero syempre, nagkikick in yung imposter syndrome na bakit ako and I'm a Filipino, I feel so small. Especially at Canva, it's so competitive. Madami talagang nare-reject dyan, di ba? Kasi everyone wants to work for Canva. Especially yung mga young people or they want to do remote work or mahilig sila sa, technology. So, ayun, so far so good naman. And madaming challenges, pero happy ako sa naging trajectory ko. Although, I always look back and think na I could have done better, sa totoo lang. Pero, there's no point going back. Talagang look forward na lang tayo. And we just do better with the stuff that we already know now.
Yes, that's a really great analogy. I just want to add something that's very Aussie, but I studied this for my Australian citizenship test. So the two animals are on the crest and on the passport, an emu and a kangaroo. Do we know why? No.
No, share
Okay.
us with us.
Hindi ko
Share
alam.
why?
Parang hindi yan
Share with
parang hindi
us.
ko na maalala yung citizenship.
It's okay. Sa lockdown kasi, malapit sa lockdown ako ng
If
citizenship test.
mo kami, i-refresh.
Refresher. Matagal na pala silang citizen. It's because those two animals don't walk backwards. They only walk forward. So very similar to your take. There's no point always looking back. I'm not saying it's bad to look back to reflect. No, of course, reflect where it's appropriate. But you don't want to dwell and be stuck in a spiral just looking back. You have to move forward.
Ang dami ko talagang career mistakes. I cringe when I think about the things.
Same
that
though.
Lalo naman din ako. Diba? Well, sa akin naman, ang experience ko dito, nung dumating ako sa Australia, nag-study lang ako ng English because gusto ko lang yung learn how to communicate kasi 'di ba pag nag-start ka mag-work like at least alam mo yung language nila, 'di ba?
Slang.
Oo, 'di ba? So, yun lang. And then nag-enroll din ako sa IT which is I didn't finish it. And
So you did the basic course?
basic course lang and then
Communication.
straight to workforce. And then Late bloomer ako actually kasi ngayon ko lang nare-realize na education pala is yun nga, kailangan mo rin talaga. And ayun, ngayon naka-enroll ako sa PT, PT personal training, which is I'm finishing it this week. This last 2 weeks na lang.
Congrats!
So certified PT na ako. So ayun, so sobrang late bloomer ko. Ngayon ko lang gustong matuto, gusto kong alam mo yan, like ayun nga parang ang hirap din mag-look back and then mag-regret ka and then, alam mo yun, and you just get stuck. Pag, actually worry about now, kung ano yung ginagawa ko ngayon, it's just keeping me move forward, learn more, educate yourself. So, eto yung, eto yung parang time ko na, ayun nga, parang kang rocket ship.
Blast off.
You just go straight up. Hindi, parang, hindi mo na siya mai-stop. You're just unstoppable. So, yun lang yung experience ko. And then sa workforce, ang dami ding experiences na good and bad. And that's something I wanna share in the future then. Like how I handled it. Paano ko na-build yung personal growth ko sa work, yung mga ganyan. So yeah, that's something that we can talk about next time.
Mahabang topic
Mahabang topic to. So, yeah, yun lang.
Kayo, ate.
Ako naman nag-start kasi ako in Australia, nag-work na ako eh. Yung educational background ko was back in the Philippines. Somewhat a bit different than your experiences here. So sa Philippines kasi iba yung kind of education eh. Iba yung sa westernized na kind of education. Sa Philippines, it's a bit more medyo subtle ba? Parang kung yung tinuro, yun lang din yung susundin mo talaga. Parang the thing is, disclaimer, hindi naman sa inaano mo yung education sa Philippines ha. It's just that mas konti kasi yung access mo dun eh into upgrading, upskilling, yung ganon. Though siguro ngayon, meron naman na, you just have to search for it talaga. Sisipahagan mo lang mag-check. But comparing it here, siguro sa work naman, kasi yung work naman is may training yan eh before you start, diba? Ang napansin ko lang, maybe the difference is that mas lax dito in a way na hindi ka ganun ka-pressured na push ka ng push to get it right the first time. I don't know, mataas din naman yung competition dito eh. Though sa Pinas kasi talagang surviving ka dun eh. Kailangan galingan mo talaga ng galingan para makuha mo yung spot mo, yung spotlight, diba? So yeah. And another thing na napansin ko sa work naman dito is balanse ka eh.
You can have work-life balance.
Exactly. Siguro kasi number one dyan, yung travel mo. Wala naman kasing, hindi naman super traffic dito. And like sa Pinas, you work for 8 hours and then you have to give time sa commute mo for another like 2 to 3 hours depending on where you live. Pag dito, if you don't have a car, may metro, yung buses are almost on time, at least 90 to 95%.
Lalo na yung pay scale sa Pilipinas, you're paid per day. Dito
Yes.
you're paid per hour. So you're allowed to have passion projects on the side, volunteer work, personal development.
Yes.
True. And there's an option here to be to work part-time,
Casual, on
you know.
call.
Yeah, kaya mas maganda, mas ma-appreciate mo pati yung pagko-commute mo kasi ang ganda ng view. 'Di ba? So, ayun lang naman. Though, ang maganda lang din naman sa Philippines is kasi syempre you're speaking with them at your own language, mas madaling mag-explain.
Of course.
things.
Your sense of belonging is there with your
Yes.
childhood peers that you went to school with.
Yeah. So, ayun. Okay naman. And yeah, compensation-wise, it's really good here.
Interesting. Thank you so much, all hosts, for sharing. I guess this segues into a good topic for me for my education story.
Yes.
So I actually wanted to share my story because I feel like it might be a good thing to listen to for other migrants, particularly those in Victoria or Melbourne. So I moved when I was 16. I moved to an area in Victoria which was not that established. There were a handful of Filipinos as well, but not particularly people who came from the same background as me. So back in the Philippines, I went to a private Catholic school. I went there all the way from junior prep to sophomore year, second year high school. And 2 days into junior year, naka-enroll pa ako mag-halfway ng junior year. Excited pa naman ako mag-prom, sayang. Anyways, 2 days into junior year, na-approve yung papeles namin. So, dito na ako pinadala. And that was always on the cards kasi my dad was like, okay, one, if you keep doing high school there, when you get here, it's not going to be recognized. So, there's no point. Just do high school here. And at that time, obviously, it's mixed feelings because I was going to miss my friends. I was going to miss my sense of belonging. But we always knew at the back of our minds, like just me and my family, that I was going to leave at one point. Like it didn't come as a shock to me. Like my dad was based here for so long. Nauna yung dad ko and then sumunod ako. So I saw it coming, but I guess it's that Filipino general experience that you know it's coming, but there are certain things with migration you can't always prepare for. Hindi mo mamamalayan yung experience hanggat nararanasan mo na. So I did half of high school here, year 10, last 2 semesters, and year 11 and 12. And I went to a public school, just your local public school. And we were the third set of year 12s to graduate. So I went to 2 different extremes. Public schools here, there's a lot of access and equity kasi nga public, so they have to take in everyone. Whereas yung private school ko sa Pilipinas, mga for lack of a better term, mga anak mayaman. People that grew up in villages, people that have yayas, people that have drivers. So ibang-iba yung kultura. And I'm keeping up with 2 different systems. But I know a lot of Filipinos at that time when I moved, they moved when they were younger, like 10 or 11. My journey was so different with that one group of girls. Again, not a personal attack. I wish them well. Hindi ko na sila kaibigan and barkada because I didn't feel like they were intellectually stimulating. Pero iba yung life experiences ko sa kanila. Like, I guess this is also a contributing factor to why wala akong barkada and I have strict boundaries up with Filipinos. One, although I had moved here a lot later than a lot of these other Filo girls who went to my school or I met during high school, I had the best English. And I have to attribute that to my school back home and the environments I grew up in. Sa bahay, nag-English kami ng lola ko, nag-English kami ni mommy. Daddy over the phone, long distance, nag-English kami. On TV, I watch American shows with my friends, my peers, my barkada. We make jokes in English. I read books in English. So I always had access to it. And then 2, I fought really hard to be in the regular English class. I didn't want to be in English as an additional language. Although a lot of teachers were asking me, do you want to be in the English as an additional language class with the refugee kids? But when they looked at my report card, it said that I've been taught English since prep.
Wow.
So I should maximize that. I was thinking in the back of my mind, like, ano pa yung point na ang rami-raming tuition fee na binayaran ng magulang ko for my expensive private school back home kung hindi ko papakinabangan yung English ko dito. And a lot of Filipinos, sadly, but also looking back, not surprisingly, held that against me, that I wanted to be in the regular English class. Because they were telling me things like, why don't you just join EAL like us? Like, we're here in the EAL class and it's easier. You'll rank up higher next to a bunch of people who don't speak English as good and you're gonna boost up. But for me, I don't like being a big fish with small fish. I like being a big fish in a big pond with other big fish. So I wanted to advocate for myself. So interesting experience. I want to share now some cultural differences of the schooling culture. And again, disclaimer, my schooling experience in the Philippines does not reflect the average migrant. There might be other migrants with different journeys. And my schooling experience in Australia also might not reflect all migrants in Victoria and Melbourne. Other people choose to send their kids to Catholic schools, private schools, all-girls schools. I didn't go to that. I just went to the regular public school. But yeah, interesting takes. And feel free, host, to chime in. Sa school ko sa Pilipinas, Miss and Sir, stricto. Catholic, very conservative. Here, they don't teach religion in public school. And interesting take, I call my teachers by first name. So there was a big jump. Diba? Naranasan niyo ba yun?
Walang ma'am, sir, diba?
Oo. Miss, I think
Miss,
you call them Miss.
oo. Or pumipili naman sila kung married, diba? Or Miss, tapos last name minsan, or first name, pinipili nila.
Wow.
Sobrang laki ng shift talaga ng education system sa Philippines pagdating dito. And may mga naririnig ako, ang kwento nila, sobrang hirap sa Philippines pagdating dito, easy na lang. Para ka na para kang cruising na lang. Kasi iba yung disiplina ng education system sa atin eh. Pukpok na pukpok ka.
Totoo.
Interesting take.
Pukpok na pukpok ka na parang, after school, ang daming assignments. Ano, matutulog pa ba tayo?
It's like you're being
Hanggang
caged,
5 p.m. no?
It's quantity sa Pilipinas,
Diba?
whereas here in Australia, it's quality. And my friends and my peers back home ask me, can you explain the difference? And I always tell them, from my take, the Philippines, they teach you what to think. Australia, they teach you how to think. Me, as an educator working with little kids from birth to 6 in childcare, if sa Pilipinas, you spill water, papagalitan ka, clean that up. In Australia, they teach you, you can spill water, this is how you clean it up. So iba yung mindset ng mga tao. And then I noticed in my school back in the Philippines, you don't get to choose your classes and your pathways. Everything in Australia, and I'm really grateful for this. I struggled with my sense of belonging, obviously missed my friends, and had imperfect experiences in both high schools, but I'm grateful that I had the best of both worlds because it made me more grateful for my experience. The experiences here in Australia, they don't base you off of your class or your batch. Di ba uso sa Pilipinas yung pataasan ng score, pataasan ng grades, kung sino yung may first honor, may batch ranking. Dito, walang batch ranking yung klase ko kasi we each have different classes to each other. You can choose your electives, you can choose your central studies. So it didn't make sense to base me off to another person when we have completely different subjects. Also, too, when you have different subjects, that allows you to plan more for your uni pathway or your post-high school pathway. So it was quite an interesting experience. I found that the high school system here focused more on hands-on practical learning, whereas my high school system back in the Philippines focused more on memorization. Again, I don't want to put down my experience and my education back home because I do admit I access one of the best of the best. If I'm fluent in the number of languages I'm fluent in today, if I'm well-spoken, had a really high standing of written and verbal English, it is because of my school back home. I do attest to that. But yeah, it's just interesting. Things like back in the Philippines, they care about what you're doing wrong and you're put down kasi line of 7, kasi bagsak. But here in Australia, they celebrate what you're doing well. Work towards your strengths. Example, like, alam mo nang hindi ka magaling mag-sciences, alam mo nang magaling ka sa arts, di lahat ng electives mo, piliin mo mag-art. Why will you put yourself in a system kung alam mong hindi yun yung trajectory or yun yung pathway mo? So yeah, interesting
Grabe.
take.
Oo, nakarelate din ako dun. Parang nung nag-aaral ako sa Philippines, parang lahat ng inaaral
Required.
ko. Oo, hindi ko naman gusto.
Biology, chemistry.
May prerequisite pa eh. You can take that specific na course if you haven't taken yung prerequisite course niya. So parang lahat kayo, yun yung pathway nyo. Wala kayong sanga-sanga na.
And unlike ngayon, parang ito lang gusto ko. Gusto ko lang matuto mag personal training. Alam mo yon. So, doon ka lang nakafocus eh. And then, yun nga, matatapos mo siya. Kesa yung like, you're doing so many subjects na parang hindi naman aligned talaga sa gusto mong
And then
gawin.
I found the substance of some of the things that they were making us doing. They couldn't justify to me why you were doing this. Basta sasabihin ng, basta gawin mo, basta i-memorize mo.
Oo.
Ganun lang. But here, the system is, teachers like that you question why are we learning this, and they're able to link to why they're learning it. Me, as an educator now, I work with young kids. I hate the term na papagsabihan yung ibang teachers na pagalitan mo yung bata tuwing nagtatanong why. Because for me, that's a sign that the child is questioning the world around them when they ask questions, when they ask why. That's a healthy, positive thing. So that's the system here. Like I noticed, okay, I'll ask, why are we learning this in math class? Math class, I remember year 10 and year 11, 12, we were learning how to pay back your student loans at my high school here in Australia, how to pay your taxes, the different tax brackets. I could ask my teacher why, and she'd be able to answer because we all pay taxes out in the workforce. So that's a lesson that it's like, tututukan ko yun kasi alam kong gagamitin ko yun. Versus yung natutunan ko sa Pilipinas, trigonometry, and I had a lovely teacher, like really props to my trig teacher, and I did love like the triangles and so on, but never ko yung ginamit. I'm sorry.
Kaya, yun nga eh. Ang funny.
Calculus, no? Algebra, calculus.
X squared.
Find your
Algebra.
X. Find your Y. Ibang Y yung gusto mo hanapin eh.
O ngayon, yung mga why na natin is iba eh.
Saka X na yun, hindi na yun dapat fina-find.
Yung mga X dyan, kalimutan na yan. So, na binabalikan.
Anyway.
But does that, looking back, and now that you understand yung
Life skill.
yung contrast ng education, does that make you a little bit angry though? Or upset, disappointed?
Yes and no.
Okay, let's start with a no.
I'm not angry because I understand that the system in the Philippines, it's not a first world country. I have to accept that. Tanggap ko yun. So, do I expect things to get better when I was studying it? Yes, of course, because when I was studying back at my private school in the Philippines, nasistress yung mommy at daddy ko tuwing tuition time na, ilan pa kaming magkakapatid. Buti sana kung only child ako at lumalangoy ako sa pera. Pero hindi naman kami lumalangoy sa pera. So, I was angry that I could see how stressed my parents were having to pay for this. And I felt like there were times in that education system I questioned whether I was gaining something from it. I mean, I was bullied back in my school back in the Philippines. I didn't agree with all the toxic Catholicism. I didn't agree with a lot of people's views. And I know my best friends who I'm still in touch with can testify to that. I complained to the ends of the earth about certain things there. I was angry about those things. But no, in the sense that I don't want to be angry because I compare my level of English and my level of understanding of the world and how I transitioned to the Australian curriculum versus other Filipino girls that I met who they would tell me, Nikki, I don't know how you do it. And then I'd ask why. And they'd be like, Nikki, you've only been here for 6 months. Your English is better than all of our English. I've been here since I was 10. You can write an essay and you know where to put punctuation marks and commas. And they would tell me, back in my public school in the Philippines, in the province, I never learned any of that. When I came here to Australia, buloktot yung English ko. Hindi ako katulad mo. You sound like you're from a movie. I don't sound like you, Nikki. And I've been here longer than you have. So no, in the sense that my education back home is still quality to a certain extent. I'm not going to deny that. But yeah, I did have parts where I was unhappy and I was angry with it. Because I'm thinking, we paid so much for the quantity of the things we were taught. I gained a lot naman extracurriculars. I loved extracurriculars. I liked sports. I liked performing arts. I liked theater, childhood friends in the community. That was nice. But then I look back at some of the written work, like some of the things I was sat down and forced to memorize, I'm never going to use. And out in adulthood, I never did use. And I remember yung mga panakot tactics ng mga teacher, like, Bagatsing, ayusin mo, hindi ka magkakatrabaho paglaki mo. And it's like, well, miss, nagtatrabaho na ako dito sa Australia ever since I was 16. Di naman yung nagkatotoo. So yeah, there was only one teacher who told me that. Disclaimer.
Yeah. Hindi, ano yan? Common talaga yan. Very fear-based yung the way we're trained at school.
Fear-based is, yes.
Punishment, di ba? Pag hindi mo ginawa to, punishment mo, ito. Madidetention
Also,
ka.
there was so much comparison because my older kuya also went to that school. So I kind of felt like siblings, if you're there and naranasan mo yung teacher na teacher din ng kuya mo or teacher din ng kapatid mong mas nakakatanda, they compare you to each other. Not that the comparisons were ever that bad. Like, I love my kuya to the ends of the earth. He never did anything wrong to me in that schooling setting. But just an interesting thing how you can't be as individual because Filipino teachers would lump sum you with your family, your siblings who went to the school, your family name, anong trabaho ng nanay mo, anong trabaho ng lolo at lola mo, ibibring up nila yun sa'yo. So, certain things like that. Yeah.
Grabe, no? Kasi I think that your education system really shapes who you are, yung identity mo. And I know Nikki is very passionate about this topic, yung identity and personal branding.
Definitely.
And paano mo i-reinvent yung sarili mo if all your life you were indoctrinated to think a certain way? Di ba sabi mo kanina, they teach you what to think.
Yes. Whereas in Australia, they teach you how to think.
So how do you reconcile that with the with your identity?
I love that you're asking
and
that.
who you are now and who you want to be? Kasi as much as you want to reinvent yourself, ang daming barriers eh. Ang daming barriers such that ang hirap baguhin ng mga bagay na nakasanayan mo na o yung mga things na tinuro sa'yo, bata ka pa, paano mo babaguhin yun? Diba? How would, kaya tinatanong kita, do you even have this sense of anger na bakit ako pinalaki ng ganito or bakit ito yung mga tinuro sa akin? Only to find out, oh my God, hindi ito align sa values ko. Hindi ito
Only to find out lahat ng minimemorize ko sa textbook, hindi ko naman gagamitin out in the workforce.
That's and how many years from the time you enter the education system at preschool, then kindergarten, that is like 15 years or 17 years of your life being indoctrinated by all these things na actually will not help you progress in life. Maybe at the start, it's it's
Yeah.
always I'd rather be educated than not
Of course,
educated.
of course. Similar take, and I hope this answers your question, but like there were a lot of good things, like obviously the memorization or more of the traditional style of learning. Napakanabangan ko din naman. Like, why am I good at picking up new languages? Why am I good at interviewing people? Because it's easy for me to memorize things. Once I read it, na memorize ko. I have laser sharp memory. A lot of people tell me that. But then I think the anger comes more so that like I thought that traditional learning would serve me more into adulthood, but it didn't. And I guess I'm not so much angry because at where I grew up back in the Philippines, where I was born and raised, that's just typical. Like it's the school my mom and dad went to. So that was just always the blueprint there. They think this is how you're going to make it in life. You go to this private school, you go to this private university, you get a job here, we milk connections here, tatanungin natin si Ninong, tatanungin natin si Ninang, tatanungin natin si Tito, Tita. We'll just milk nepotism. And again, not a bad thing. I always think, what if I didn't move when I was 16? What if I did go down that path? But I try to focus on the now. And I think my now take is like, okay, the bit where my identity changes. I kept thinking I needed to be like the Filipino system back home. Nung nagtapos ako ng high school dito, galit na galit ako. Umiiyak ako noon. Nung bata pa ako, 16, 17, 18, 19. My biggest insecurity was all of my friends from my school back home, like my inner core, and like they know who they are. They all went straight to university after high school. And we all knew that they were going to do that. I went to DLSU, Ateneo, UP, and I'm here in Australia. I was a permanent resident, and I didn't go straight to university after high school. I worked a job. I was working a job ever since I was 16. I went to TAFE. I studied childcare, community services, Australian Sign Language, and my pathway was so different from my peers back home. I did beat myself up over it more than I should have. I should have just taken it with a grain of salt that I was meant for different things because the curriculum here in Australia is so different. I can't use the standards back home for the lifestyle I'm living here. But what's done is done. So nandito na ako. But people do ask me that frequently, like, Nikki, paano yun? Like, high school ka pa lang, nagtatrabaho ka na. Because my peers back home, nobody had to get a job. Nobody moved out at 18, 19. I moved out at 19. I had to get a job. Everybody in my high school in Australia gets a job at 15, 16. If you're working at a cafe, you're working in retail, hindi yun nakakahiya dito. For Australians, that's very respected because why? It teaches you time management. What does customer service teach you? It teaches you how to deal with shitty people, which, let's be for real, the workforce is filled with shitty people. It teaches you how to follow rules, how to follow a routine, how to work towards a common goal. Whereas back home in the Philippines, I imagine, would I ever be able to do this? Parang hindi, kasi what time would we end class? 4:30. Tapos ang rami ko pang assignment. Tapos kung magtatrabaho pa ako dun, people would look down on me. Like, I think the high school that I went to, like junior prep all the way to high school, the school I went to, if I got a job, let's say, working at Jollibee there, tatawanan ako ng mga tao. Iisipin nila na, bakit ka nagtatrabaho? You have a yaya at home and you live in this subdivision and you're working a blue collar customer service, or you're working in like retail or hospo. That's not respected in the community I grew up in. I remember a significant one, my lola asking what I did over the summer. And I was so proud of myself because I got my first pay slip. And looking back, $8 an hour is nothing. But for me, who was new to this country, the fact that I pushed myself to get a job and the fact that I did get a job, I celebrated that. And I told my lola I am working at the local cafe. I clean tables and I wash dishes, which is really normal here. Like, if you say that to any Australian, they wouldn't hold that against you. Normal lang yun dito na magtatrabaho ka. Pero galit na galit yung lola ko. Bakit ka nagtatrabaho? Bakit ganun yung trabaho mo? Dito ka lumaki, taga ganitong subdivision ka, taga ganitong pamilya ka, tapos naghuhugas ka dyan ng pinggan? Maghanap ka ng ibang trabaho. Lola, I love you. But yeah, it's just an interesting demographic. Iba kasi yung kinalakihan niyang lifestyle. And they're used to that. You shelter kids to the end of the earth and you coddle them, and only in their mid-20s, early 20s do they get their first jobs. Whereas here, Australia, at homeroom class at 15, 16, 17, they're teaching me how to make my resume. My teachers are telling me, get a job after school, I'll help you. I'll be your reference. You can put down my school email and I'll be your reference. Teachers here will tell you who's hiring. Teachers here will tell you how to write your resume. because the culture here supports real world learning. It doesn't put people down to be in the workforce. Just an interesting difference. I think mas hiyang ako dito kasi mas hands-on learner ako. Yeah. Any take on anyone's experiences from the host on how the system here has just served you differently versus the system back home?
Sa akin, actually, sobrang grateful ako na andito ako sa Australia. Kasi lahat na-access mo dito eh. Like for free. Alam mo yun? Kahit yung education, you can get it for free.
You can go on a student loan if your parents can't pay for it. Yes.
So, sa akin, like parang, wow, you cannot get this back home. Alam mo yun?
Mas madaling sumakses dito.
Diba? So, alam mo yun, may mga workshop, nasa sayo na lang if you really
You
want to.
can find catch-ups, mentorships. Yes.
Diba? So, sa akin, sobrang grateful and talagang happy ako dito. Like, ako, so far, parang, last week, like, I got the scholarship from work, diba? So, alam mo yun, hindi ko yun na-experience sa Philippines to get the scholarship, diba? So, sa akin, my God, parang nasashock din ako sa kung ano yung maipoprovide ng Australia sa'yo.
We truly
Alam mo yun?
are
And
the
then,
lucky country.
And then, nasa sa'yo na lang talaga kung paano mo gagamitin. Ano din, okay, talaga, kung i-compare ko yung life ko sa Philippines into dito, sobrang gaan and sobrang grateful din ako.
Maybe sa akin naman kasi I worked in the Philippines for like I think it's 10 years na noon. I worked there for 10 years. And then ang laki ng difference talaga dito eh. Simulan mo sa paghahanap ng job, no?
Dun din.
Sa Pinas, pagka naghahanap ka ng trabaho doon, talagang dugot pawis eh. Sa totoo lang. Yung competition ang taas din. And yun nga, kung wala kang connections or wala kang kakilala sa company, parang yung chances mo are 50-50. And bukod doon, depende pa kung galing ka sa prominent na school or not.
Brand name, toxic
Exactly.
Catholics, the Big Four.
True. Yun, the big four, no? Kung hindi ka galing doon, wala. Hindi ka sure kung makakapasok ka sa company. It doesn't matter what your experiences are. So, another thing is, of course, yung bago ka makapasok sa job, you have to go under yung mga medical
Clearances.
mga clearances. While dito, parang hindi man ako nag-medical dito nung pumasok ako sa una kong job.
Hindi naman mukha may sakit, girl. Ganda-ganda mo. Inuwing ka nga eh.
Oo, diba?
Baka gusto mo na mag-apply ng trabaho sa ibang company. Just saying.
Diba? So, ayun lang. And then, you have to pay extra para lang makakuha ka ng mas mataas na Medicare sa Pinas. Dito, provided
Bulok
lahat ng
ng healthcare
company,
system
diba?
sa Pilipinas.
Oh my God. And then, may mga pa yun eh. May mga sickness na hindi kasama sa Medicare system nila and all, mga ganyan. And not against sa politics naman, Philippines, but you know how it is. Nakakalungkot lang doon kasi ang laki ng tax mo, liit ng kinikita mo, and you can't even see kung saan napupunta yung binabayad mo sa government.
Iiyak na lang ako.
Exactly. Whilst dito,
Nakikita mo.
You see your
napaka-convenient.
taxes, you see it in council
Yung
parks,
road.
playgrounds, libraries.
Yes.
Sobrang free access ka sa lahat. Saan ka makakakita sa Pinas na free access yung public library?
Thank you, girls, for sharing. Ako naman, I'm very curious na, syempre, di ba, as we grow, we evolve, yung challenges in life, mas, lumalaki din, di ba? How would you link education to become the person that you want to be? Kasi, if you are dealing with bigger problems, more complex problems in life, you cannot afford to stay the same.
Yes,
diba?
yes.
Because your problems will catch on. Actually, the more na nag-grow ka, the more
The
na
more lumalaki yung mga
nagde-develop ka,
problema.
you're just exchanging one kind of problem for a more complex kind of
Yes.
problem. So, because nasa nasa education naman yung topic natin, and I know that education is so close to your heart. What is your tip or advice sa mga audience natin so that we can start to curate and be intentional with the kind of education that we invest in
Yes.
to help us become the person
Of course.
that we wanna be? Hindi yung nagdi-default ka lang kung ano yung nandyan.
Oo, or kung ano yung uso.
O kung ano yung available. Kasi minsan naman, ano rin yun, pitfall na ang daming access sa education. So, nagda-double ka with so many things. Pero actually,
Hindi naman pala yun yung gusto mo.
it doesn't really help you level up.
That's a really great question. I think we're really fortunate to be in Australia where they have a culture of you actually can talk to people who are more senior. I feel like sa Pilipinas, you need to know people to talk to the people at the top. But I think advice to listeners would be if you want to find out about a particular job, a particular field, a particular company, you have to talk to someone who's actually living that experience. Like you can read so much about it, you can watch videos, but iba pa rin when you've encountered someone who's lived through it. Like example, I can watch videos about swimming, listen to talks about swimming, read about swimming, but I'm only going to learn how to swim once I swim. Yeah. So something like that. If you can talk to people, if you can find a way to talk to people who are in that field, then they can impart that advice. A second thing, just to specify for Filipino culture, try to understand that certain Filipino demographics back home for education don't apply here. Like dito nasa-stress yung mga ibang Pilipino na public school lang yung pinasok nila sa anak nila, how will their kids keep up? But remember, the standard here for public school system, like public education, it's not perfect. I post a lot of advocacy about how Australian public schools could be better, but it's not as big of a divide as it is in the Philippines. Public school teachers here do make a wage. And public school teachers here versus private school teachers, they both have the same qualifications. So don't think that like the standards back home of like Filipino education need to be exactly the same here. They don't. You're in a completely different landscape. Intindihin mo yun. Because I think yun yung mali ko, thinking that I should use the system back home to apply to my lifestyle here, when that system simply does not work here because we're in a completely different country with completely different set of opportunities. So just understand that the workforce here is different and there's different opportunities. Also here, education is seen as a holistic thing. Okay, it doesn't have to be university, it doesn't have to be postgrad. It can be a short course. It can be at the local community center. It can be a mentorship with an older ate, kuya, or an older lolo, lola who has done that before, or someone in the community who has experienced in that. It can also be going to events, going to conferences. That's also education. I don't think education is only within the four walls of a classroom. And then lastly, make use of Australian public libraries. You can learn new languages, listen to audiobooks, read magazines, read up on different topics. Yeah, education here, it's an oyster of things, but definitely see it as a whole view, and it's not just in the classroom. Learning a new skill, a new sport, a new language, for me, that's still education.
Ang ganda. Nakarelate ka, no? Kasi siya talaga yung anti-education eh. Kasi wala
Anti-formal learning.
Wala sa dugo nila yung nag-aaral, yung mahilig mag-aaral. Opposite sa family ko talagang, I really gained that discipline to study. Kasi we actually prize
Same
education
yung
in my
pamilya ko.
family.
Oo.
And I use it to my advantage. Kasi pagdating sa Australia, kahit na hindi ako nakakasabay nung una, I know that I'm a good learner. And that's all I have. I might not be the smartest person. And I'll never be the smartest person. But I am a freaking good learner.
Same.
And that's more than enough. Kasi ngayon, ang uso is just-in-time learning. You don't have to read like a full book about communication. You kind of just learn bits and pieces.
Listen to a podcast on the side, read a small book
Yes.
before you sleep, but you don't have to do the full formal course on it.
Yeah. And you execute.
Yes.
And that's also something that we're learning more and more in our fitness program. Now, you can read all the books in the world about how to lose weight. Diba? What exercise to get the abs. Pero kung hindi ka nag-execute and you're not putting yourself at risk, kasi takot tayo mag-fail, takot tayo mag-make mistakes. Mistakes are actually your fastest pathway. That's the fastest way to learn.
Amen.
Kapag willing ka magkamali and you are coachable. Kasi, di ba, sa mga sinasabi mo na, like, seek mentorship, seek coaching. Well, yeah, that's actually something na dapat number one yan eh. Because no amount of book can teach you what you can get from a mentor or a coach who's been there, done that. Na-accelerate pa lalo.
Oo.
Diba? Like pull-ups. Okay, you can watch YouTube, learn how to do pull-up, yung nasa bar ka. Or get someone to coach you. And what takes people 6 months to learn, nagawa mo in 3 weeks. Right? Kasi ganun kabilis eh. And I don't know, bakit ba tayo takot mag-seek out ng mentorship or coaching? Kasi we don't like being called out. Diba? Ayaw natin na pinopoint out yung weaknesses or mistakes natin.
But that's how we learn.
That's the kind
And
of
kasi yung
education.
structure.
Yeah, that's the kind of education that sadly we weren't actually encouraged to go through. Kasi sa Philippines, pag nagkamali ka, they associate it with punishment,
Oo.
with not being good enough.
Or hindi ka matalino. Pero hindi nila ini-explore. Baka hindi ka matalino sa isang topic na yun, pero marami kang talino sa ibang field.
But how do you know if you're good at something if you can't even make mistakes?
True.
Diba? So dito, pagdating mo sa Australia, sobrang careful mo. You're walking on eggshells kasi feeling mo pag nagkamali ka, may something bad na mangyayari.
Baka ma-shame ka katulad ng pag-shame ng mga guro
Yeah,
sa
you'll get
Pilipinas.
shamed, you'll get judged and all
mapapahiya ka.
Oo, ganun nga yun. Siguro kaya I had really bad experience din sa education nung nag-aaral ako sa Philippines. Kasi for me, parang lagi ka na lang, alam mo yun.
Sermonan.
Oo. Parang every time kino-call out ka pag mali yung sinasagot mo and everyone will laugh at you. Alam mo yun, yung parang so, nadala mo siya So parang for you, parang ayaw mo na din.
Speaking of
Gabi
bullying,
ng
ang dami kong experience yan sa
Diba?
Pinas. Not only sa sa school, but sa workplace din. Ang daming ganun eh. Pero, yun nga, sabi mga ka-ati, diba? Experience is the best teacher.
Yes.
Kasi if you don't get to, experience mistakes, you can't learn anything.
Tsaka ano
You're exactly
tayo,
gonna apply.
and I think that, we should really look at everything in reverse. Alam mo yung saying na begin with the end in mind. What do I want to be? What is the end goal for me? Do I want to be a politician? Do I want to be a speaker? Do I want to be an author? Do I want to be a director? Decide on that. When work backwards, what are the things that I need to learn and things I need to get exposure to, and do that. Hindi yung ang dami-dami mong tinatry, ilang years ka na naghahanap ng purpose mo, ilang years ka nang nag-aaral and then nagko-quit ka and then you start again. Because you never actually ask yourself the right question.
Yes.
Your starting point should always be, if I was 90 years old, where do I wanna be? Like long-term ka talaga, and then mag-curate ka ng education, like design your education, design your life, so that when you reach that age, you know that you made it. Hindi yung para kang sumusunod lang sa trend. Ay, parang cool maging digital creator ngayon. Or parang gusto ko yan, astig graphic designer. Uy, parang ang cool niyan, vlogger. But, dude, is that really what you want?
Oo.
Or gusto mo lang trendy ka kasi nga, parang feeling mo napapag-iwanan ka. O mag-aral ka dyan ng investment trading, investment sa shares,
Mahirap
Bitcoin.
din yan dito. Marami akong nakikitang Pilipino na sumasabay sa parang uso or sinasabi ng mga tito-tita nila na sabayan nila. Pero mahirap yun dito because you rack up a student debt for your undergrad and then you go on HEX debt and then you shift but you already have an existing HEX
Nagbayad
debt.
ka na.
So nagbayad ka na tapos may utang ka pa. Tapos may bago kang utang kasi nagbago kang course. And then magbabago ka na namang course. So magkano na ngayon yung utang mo?
Oo, it requires creativity. Kasi, okay, if you wanna be a doctor or nasa STEM ka, di ba, yung science, technology, engineering, maths, whatever, of course, you have to take the traditional path. Kasi at the moment, there's really no substitute for it. You wanna be the next Elon Musk? Well, you gotta be a genius,
Or things
right?
with licensures, you need to take the right pathways for licensure
Yung mga
jobs.
regulated na mga
of course,
industry,
of
like you want to
course.
be a financial advisor, you want to be a mortgage
Yes.
broker. Of course, you have to take. Pero don't forget that Filipinos are one of the most creative people on this planet.
Yes.
If you don't have the money right now, and money is a problem,
May diskarte ka.
may diskarteng Pilipino. Yan yung masarap aralin. Yung diskarteng Pilipino na pwede mong dalhin kahit nasa Australia ka. Wala masama, basta wala kang mga naaapakan.
Oo.
Diba? And hindi ka naman nagtitake advantage over other people. But yun yung Filipino genius na tinatawag eh. Because sa Philippines, sa sobrang hirap ng buhay, actually, dun ka nga natuto how to be creative with your resources eh. So for me, okay, you come up with your list, alam mo na yung education na kailangan mong i-take, now you have to be creative. How do you start? How do you get started? And then magiging creative ka na, how you find the resources. Like si Ging, nagkaroon siya ng sponsorship sa work, and she chose the course na gusto niya. Hindi yung pinili ng trabaho niya. 'Di ba? How amazing is that?
Oo nga eh. Kasi this time, gusto kong gawin kung ano talaga yung, alam mo yun, yung something na makukuha
Para
ko
sa'yo
yung growth.
talaga.
Oo. Kasi
Iba.
dati kasi ganun din ako, like you mentioned na gusto mo lang sumabay sa trend, gusto mo lang, alam mo yun, gusto mo maging digital creator. But minsan napapaisip din talaga ako na, is this really what I want? Alam mo yun? And mag-ano ba talaga ako? Mag-grow ba ako talaga dito?
Ikaw ba, Nikki, do you have plans to enroll yourself or invest in a different kind of education to continue growing and developing? Kasi yun yung magiging foundation mo to level up, diba?
That
So,
is
may ganun ka
a
ba?
really good question. I always think to like my what if had I stayed back in the Philippines, my dream course, like if I finished high school back home, I think I would have gone fever dream. I think I would have gone to UP. I would have loved to study anthropology because I like history and possibly linguistics because I also like learning languages. So that's something I'm exploring. But I think now I don't want to study it undergrad hex that way kasi mabigat rin yung mga hex that dito. Hindi biro yung mangutang dito sa Department of Education. But definitely I'm looking into investing in some and also travel. But I'm still trying to figure it out. Trying to figure it out with what's the best way for me to maximize because my identity is quite interesting. I carry a lot of hats. So in the education space, like general teacher education has benefited me. In the organizing space, I studied community services, but I also learned a lot on the job, like organizing fiestas, meeting people, meeting volunteers. But then there's also another part of me like, okay, political organizing, I did a fellowship. What about all the other things that I do, like public speaking, advocacy? Like I do so many little things. So I'm like, okay, will I ever take a course in that? Perhaps. Maybe I'll invest in Coursera or those online platforms. Yeah, I don't ever really think I'll stop learning. Like right now, you can open up my phone. It's over there, so I'm not going to show everyone. But I've got like 3 or 4 language apps. I have 2 or 3 type of like apps where you listen to videos of topics you like and then a podcast platform. So I don't ever really think I'm going to stop learning. But it's just a matter of like formal courses, I still have to figure out which one is the best for me.
Ang galing.
Yeah.
It
Because
sounds
our
like-
identity is always evolving. And same with what we learn.
Tsaka ano din, talagang ramdam ko na you're in control of your education.
Yes.
It's, you know, pag na-reach
Because
mo ng
I'm the one
ganitong
who's
age.
going into debt for it.
And ikaw yung nag-i-invest ng time. So, if you're gonna study and invest your time, might as well doon na sa gusto mo. Yung kaya masaya ka lang. Di ba? Hindi naman kailangan na it's linked to wealth or success. Like, basta if happy ka and nag-grow ka. And
Yun
nakakatulong
siguro yung big difference ng identity ko dito versus sa Pilipinas. Mas naging independent ako dito. Kasi napilitan ako eh. Wala akong yaya dito, wala yung lola ko, wala yung mommy ko, walang naglalaban ng damit ko. Alam mo yun? Dati yung tipong napaka-sheltered at komportable ng buhay ko tapos nawala lahat nun. So napa-step out of my comfort zone ako. Pero with that, the plus has been, I really had to step up and take ownership of my own education. My mom and dad did not study early childhood in Australia, so they can't help me with that pathway. They have an understanding of my system, pero hindi siya tulad ng Pilipinas that, you know, my parents will sit me down and tell me what to go for, what course to go for, what job to go for. Here, I had to do all of that research by myself. I didn't have, another Filipino tita or another Filipina figure helping me out with that. I had to learn those things for myself. So I totally agree with that I had to be independent and I had to take ownership of it.
Yeah.
And that is actually something that I feel like Australians do better than Filipinos. You're able to individualize your pathway for education here so much more because you have opportunity to pay for things yourself with the student loan system, with free TAFE courses, with upskilling. But again, not saying it's bad. If you ever rely on your parents or you ever worked for a family business, tanggap ko yun and that's also okay.
Nice, ang galing.
Ang galing.
And then,
Tsaka wala kang piniplease. Di ba? Yung mga ganyan na ikaw lang nagde-decide for yourself.
kasi
Diba?
sa akin, bottom line is, what is the impact that you are creating in the real world, in the external world,
Yes.
with the education that you have? Because,
Yes.
okay, you can be so educated and so damn successful on your own, na mag-isa ka, pero wala ka namang impact.
Oo. Parang nakinabang ka nga, pero ikaw lang yung nakinabang.
Yeah, so choose the kind of education that does not only serve you, but also serves those communities that you
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest reasons why I chose early childhood. You know, people stop and ask me, okay, why did you choose early childhood? That's the youngest age group. Yun yung pinakamahirap because they poo, pee, and fart. Nappy changes, toileting, and, still learning different things at that age. But I chose that because I felt like, okay, when I look back, regardless of whether I have kids or not, I don't think I will because they're so expensive. I know that my field as an early childhood educator, when I look at my students, that's not just a kid, that's like the next doctor, that's the next lawyer. That is the highest form of public service for me, to be a teacher knowing that I am mentoring these minds. They might forget the academic literacy stuff that I teach. They might forget the arithmetic. They might forget the maths. But they'll never forget that I tried to instill in them that the world is the classroom, that this is how you learn, and that you're in school to learn how to learn. And yeah, it's an interesting take because when you're a teacher, the biggest compliment is when you see your students surpass you. So when I look at my students, I'm not hoping that like, oh, mamememorize nila yung times table ng ganito, mamememorize nila lahat ng lingwahe ng ganito. No, I'm looking at it that they find their own sense of self, their own purpose, and that they're able to make it far in life, even if that means surpassing me. So yeah, that does tie back to why did I go back to education? Because I knew that we are the job behind all the other jobs to be a teacher. When you invest in teachers, you invest in every single other job too.
Actually, pangarap ko talaga mag-build ng school. School of life.
Oo nga.
Ever since bata ako. Nag-drawing pa ako yung maliit lang na school tapos may flag. Yeah,
I
it
love
was like
that.
it was like a silly idea. na
That's so
parang
Filipino, yung school na may flag. I love that. I love that.
Ang
I love
pangit
that.
nung, like, literal, it's like roof, square, and then my flag. Kasi yung ganun drawing, alam nila school yun, di ba? But, ang nakakatawa, hindi ko alam na ibang school pala yung gusto kong i-build. Not the traditional school,
Like
but
a
the school
thought
of
school.
life. Yes. So,
Nice.
ikaw, Mars, may gusto mo bang i-share before we wrap
Actually,
it up?
speechless ako. Hindi, joke. Ang dami nakaka-inspire, to be honest. Like, giving back to the community. Like, going dun sa roots ba? Kasi ang ganda nun eh. Oo nga naman, mga bata, ano ba yung nalalaman nila, di ba, at the moment. So, you teach them how to do things instead of what they should do.
Yes.
And that's a really, really good thing. Kasi pag lumaki sila, ano bang babalikan nila? Siyempre kung ano yung tinuro ng guru nila, di ba? Nakakatuwa. Kasi I wish I met someone like you na naging teacher ko nung bata pa ako. Maybe
Sana may teacher Nikki kami.
Sana
no?
may teacher akong
Nikki,
ganyan.
diba?
Okay, I'm gonna record that clip and play it back to my students every single time they're fighting me.
Yeah. So,
Grabe.
realize mo lang yun eh. Pagka nasa age ka na, oh my God, I should have done yung mga bagay na naiisip kong gawin ngayon. So, sometimes you think na, is it too late for me? But it is what it is. You just have to do what you have at
Nag-evolve
the
lang
moment.
din kasi yung ano eh, yung way of yun education. Iba na siya yung the way of teaching, di ba? Hindi na siya katulad dati na alam mo yun, sobrang traditional. Di ba?
We live in a very interesting times. Lalo
Yes.
na with AI. Oh my gosh. That's another topic.
Alam mo, yung AI, tinuturo na din yan para how to use it properly. Kasi dun sa course ko ngayon, talagang tinuturuan kami paano mag-search sa AI ng maayos. Hindi yung parang, AI mo na lang lahat. Alam mo yun? But,
Parang kinapi-paste
oo,
mo na lang.
kinapi-paste mo na. But yun, isa
Parang
din
robot
yun.
na yung sagot mo, no?
So, yun. Well, nakaka-inspire. Ang daming learning from Nikki, no?
Thank you.
And meron lang akong question. Kasi maybe hindi naman to tinatanong. Well, sa atin din naman, it aligns to us din. Na parang tinatanong na, alam mo yun, sa ang dami nating ginagawa, di ba? You're doing this, you're
Organizing,
volunteer ka, tapos nagtiteach ka. So alam mo yun, not everyone ask the question na, how are you, Nikki? Like, alam mo yun,
How are you? How are you?
Thank you. That's a really
Are you
great
happy?
question.
Yeah, we want to end that podcast with this question because, yeah.
I'm in a period of transition since you asked how I am. It's 10 years going on 11. 10 years ago, I was 16 in NAIA. I did not think that my life in Australia would be my life here today. I thought my life in Australia would look a little bit different, but I'm actually happier with how things have turned out. I think it took me a while to figure out my pathway, but I'm glad that things in the past didn't work out for me because there were so much bigger and better things in store for me. Maybe not bigger financially because I'm never going to make millions being a teacher, but bigger in the sense that the hearts that I touch are more, bigger in the sense that it meets my sense of clarity and my sense of purpose more, bigger in the sense that I'll look back and know that my students will have made it past me, and that is probably the best investment that I'll make. So I'm content with where I'm at. Still struggling with my sense of identity. I think every migrant will go through that. I still struggle with days of feeling behind. People always tell me, oh my God, you've accomplished so much. And I'm just like, I'm just getting started. Just wait and see. And
Rocket
thank
ship din
you.
siya.
She's launching. Yeah. So, I'm so
Unstoppable.
proud of you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you, Nikki. And kahit na ano lang kami, kakameet, literal, we just met
Second
once
meeting.
in person.
Oo
This is the
nga
second
eh.
meeting that we have.
Actually, nung nakita ko siya sa Philka ba yun?
Yes.
Philka, ikaw yung ang dami mong questions eh. And then, parang natututo din ako kasi pag someone asked the question, syempre makikinig ka, di ba? Like, sino tong ano na to?
Yes, yes.
Like, talagang, spotlight, di ba?
Itong ano na to.
Sino to?
Tapos ngayon,
Like,
then naman
ngayon,
guest na siya.
guest na siya. Alam mo yun? And, nakaka-inspire lang yung ginagawa mo.
And if you look at her Instagram, grabe. Yung mga note to self niya, talagang
Thank you.
inspiring. Makaka-resonate ka.
And at the young age, di ba? Andito siya sa...
Pre-30, 26 going on 27.
Di ba?
Ako, at 26, huwag niyo nang alamin.
Wag niyo
Wala
lang
kang
alamin.
ginagawa.
Balikan niyo
Wala
na lang
akong
yung
ginagawa at 26.
yung ibang episode natin kasi andun lahat kung ano yung mga ginagawa namin. No, 26, di ba? 20s, di ba? Well, Nikki, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And definitely follow the 1% Marites on their social media platforms.
Thank you.
And sana hindi lang to yung last time na magi-guesting
Of
ka.
course,
So,
there's
we
more to
wanna get
come.
back na pag ano ka na, sobrang successful mo na, di ba, in the future.
Yeah. And just know that just you simply being here na talagang sinabay niya tayo sa schedule niya. Ako, sobrang privileged ako.
Oo.
Sobrang privileged ako that someone would want to guest and have this conversation. Something so personal in the podcast. We don't often get this opportunity. Kaya hindi ko talaga pinalampas.
Oo.
So, sobrang grateful din ako na you chose our platform to share your stories. Kasi, as you know, we're building, constantly building, and at the same time growing ourselves. And it's great that you get to be a part of our journey.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. O mga kumarites.
Okay.
Ang ganda, nag-iinit at nagbabago yung topics natin. And ang dami pa, there's so much more to talk about. And I know, marami ka pang share. Maybe mahaba na yung time natin eh. So we'll talk about that maybe on the next podcast. Mag-guesting ulit si Nikki sa atin. Yan,
Oo, babalikan tayo ni Nikki.
Anyway, thank you so much guys for tuning in sa topic natin today. And to everyone who's listening, please do follow us on our social media platforms, on our Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We are the 1% Marites here in Sydney.
Your number one source of chismis, word spreading. Wow, sino yun?
Si Mami? O
Mami?
si Mary?
Mami, naririnig yung ano mo. Oh my God.